Chapter 8. Page 85. Cycles of Transportation. The coming mode of transportation will be by airplane, and I feel sure they will be used in the Great War to come. The Bible tells us that Enoch, who was the seventh from Adam, a number generally referred to as divine, was translated to heaven for his faith at the age of 365 years. This event took place about 3017 BC. I believe that at that time they had all modern inventions and that Enoch went up in an airplane. The writer of the book, probably not having seen an airplane before and seeing Enoch go into the sky, thought that he had gone to heaven. We are now in the 5,000-year cycle, from the time that Enoch was transferred to heaven, and this indicates the progress of the airplane at this time. Elijah was also translated to heaven in a cloud of fire, in 896 BC. I believe this, too, was an airplane. Since the chariot was seen blazing with some kind of fire or gas, the recorder thought it was just something to take Elijah to heaven. Man first traveled by land, then conquered the water, and last, the greatest feat of all, is conquering the air, which was plainly foretold in the Bible. In 1602 there was a railway built in Newcastle, England, operated by horsepower. In 1776, the first iron rails were laid, the first important step leading to railways. In July 1801, there was a completed tram road from Croydon to Wandsworth, England. In 1802, the first high-pressure locomotive was invented. In 1813, William Hedley built a locomotive. In 1824, the first locomotive, by George Stephenson, traveled 6 miles per hour. In 1829, the rocket made a speed of 15 miles per hour. In 1834, the Firefly locomotive made a speed of 20 miles an hour, and in 1839, the North Star made a speed of 37 miles per hour. Man used the air as power for sailing vessels long years before he ever dreamed that it could be used to travel through by airplane. The first idea of steam navigation was patented by Jonathan in 1713, and later in 1783, a steamboat by Fitch. In 1793 the first real steamboat by Fulton. On August 9, 1803, Fulton's steamboat, the Clermont, made its first trip up the Hudson. In 1807, Fulton started a steamboat line on the Hudson. On July 15, 1819, the first steamship made a trip from New York to Liverpool in 26 days. In October 1829, a locomotive by steam carriages started in Liverpool. In June 1838, the Great Western made a trip from Bristol, arrived in New York, making the voyage in 18 days. The next record for ocean travel was made in 1851 when the Pacific crossed the Atlantic in 9 days, 19 hours and 25 minutes. In 1917, a German submarine boat made a successful trip from Germany to Baltimore. The advent of automobiles, or gas engines, began in 1877, when the first gas engine was invented by Otto. In 1879, a gasoline motor was invented by Selden. In 1892, the first automobile was operated by Scia. Note that this was repeating the 500-year cycle, and 100 years before the first attempt was made to start an iron railway, and in 1783, the first time a balloon went up which carried a passenger. In our modern times the first attempt by man to conquer the air by means of plane or balloon was in June 1783, when Joseph and Stephen Montgolfier built the first balloon, but it carried no passengers. In November 1783, for the first time man went up in a balloon that sailed over Paris. In 1859, John Wise sailed in a balloon from St. Louis to Henderson, New York, in 20 hours, the greatest distance accomplished up to that time. In 1900, Count Zeppelin flew the first dirigible. In November 1903, Wilbur and Orville Wright made their first flight in an airplane which rose under its own power. Note that his was 100 years after Fulton's first steamboat went up the Hudson, again repeating the 100-year cycle. In July 1908 Glenn H. Curtiss flew his first airplane. In July 1909, Charles K. Hamilton flew from New York to Philadelphia, 74 miles. Note 100 years before this, in 1807, Fulton started the first steamship line up the Hudson. From 1914 to 1918, Airplanes were used in the Great World War, 100 years before steamers began crossing the Atlantic Ocean for the first time. In June 1919, first non-stop flight from St. John's, Newfoundland, to Ireland. In July 1919, the R-34 made a successful flight from Scotland to Mineola, Long Island. The R-34 made the trip in 64 hours and 13 minutes. 100 years previous to this, the first fast steamship crossed the Atlantic. In May 1923, Lieutenant Macready and Kelly made a non-stop flight from New York to San Diego, California. In July 1923, sunrise to sunset flight from New York to San Francisco. The flight was made by Russell L. Mahon. March 17 to September 28, 1924, L. H. Smith and Lee Wade flew around the world the first time. May 1926, Richard E. Byrd circled the North Pole with the dirigible. May 21, 1927, Charles A. Lindbergh made the first successful flight across the Atlantic from New York to Paris. Note how the airplane followed 100 years later after the fast steamer across the Atlantic. As railroad and ocean transportation made rapid progress from 1807 to 1838, so is airplane transportation making rapid progress, and I predict that in 1938, airplanes will be traveling at the rate of 1,000 miles an hour to all parts of the Earth, carrying passengers and freight. My interpretation of the cycles to repeat in future indicates that from 1928 to 1932, one of the greatest battles of all history will be fought in the air. In the next few years, airplanes will be making successful trips around the world and carrying passengers. Man has succeeded in traveling on the Earth by steam, gas and electricity. The automobile solved the problem of motor transportation without rail. The water was first conquered in a crude canoe, next with a sailing vessel, then the fast steamers, and later the submarine by which man can travel secretly under the water. The next and last great conquest was the air, and as nations have fought battles on the land, on the water, and used the submarine for successful warfare under the water, the next and last great step in transportation will be in the air. It is but natural to expect that the greatest battle of all will take place in the air, when all modern inventions will be used to destroy human life. As stated in the Bible, unless the time be shortened, no human being will be left on this earth, but the good book has promised that the time will be shortened. Nations will try this new mode to conquer each other before the United Kingdom, spoken of in the Bible, can be realized.